Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 42 of the Future of Work show. And this is our very first this season. I'm so delighted to come back and have this conversation with some amazing guests. As if you've been following the show, you know, we've had very interesting conversations with thought leaders across the world. The last couple of years, we've had academics from leading business schools, and we've had amazing entrepreneurs come on the show to talk about ideas that are changing the way we work and, in fact, the way we live. Now, in today's show, I have with me a very special guest, Manish Maheshwari, and I'll just be bringing him on in a second. Manish Maheshwari is the founder and CEO of Metaversity, and that's going to be the topic of our conversation today. What's it going to be like to study in the Metaversity? And with that, let me bring Manish on. Hi, Manish.
Hi, Dr. Shalini. How are you doing?
Good. So wonderful to have you with us on the show. Let me give you a little bit of background about Manish. And Manish has had an extremely illustrious corporate career. He is an MBA from the Wharton School. And before becoming an entrepreneur, he was the head of Twitter in India. So Manish, what made you make this transition from, the regular corporate journey? You've worked with amazing organizations, McKinsey, P&G, Flipkart, Twitter, and now becoming an entrepreneur.
So first of all, thank you, Shalini, for that question. So my connection with education is quite deep, right? I mean, I come from India's hinterland. And the reason why where I am today is because of the education. I also witnessed that in the last 2 years, COVID has disrupted the way things were happening in the education sector. And everyone was fumbling to figure out what's the right way to do it. At the same time, technology has been progressing at a very fast pace. And given my background and my interest, I felt that now would be a good time to sort of, marry my passion with what I could really change and create an impact here in the area of education. So that's why I chose to do this.
Wow. More power to you, Manish, in this journey. I'm so so happy that to see people take this leap and start off ideas which are actually fairly cutting edge. And let me just start by trying to understand this, Manish. Metaverse has been the term of the last several months. Everybody's talking about it. Organizations have rebranded themselves, to reflect this shift of focus. So why has the metaverse become such a big deal? And, what is the metaverse?
So let me explain in a very simple term, right? So metaverse is essentially interoperable virtual space, right? And the obvious question people will ask is, what's the difference between internet and metaverse, right? So internet is a two-dimensional space. So when you see a website or when you see any kind of a digital asset, it's actually in two dimension. And you click on it, you go to a different website, it's also in 2 dimension. So you're actually looking at it. You are not inside it, right? And that's the key difference between internet and metaverse. In the metaverse, you are actually inside it. The whole experience is immersive. It's, in a way, you can call it metaverse as a embodied internet, right? So that's a key difference. 2 dimension versus a 3 dimension immersive space. Now, if you think about it, our real world is 3D and immersive as well. For example, if I look at my own house, I am in my study room, which is a real space. I can leave this room and enter into my daughter's room, which is another three-dimensional real space, right? And I think there is a connecting door that connects the two spaces. Now, in the virtual world, that was missing, right? There was no 3-dimensional virtual space. And I think technology has progressed so much today that you can create a virtual 3-dimensional space. You can exist in that and you can do whatever you want to do there. You can invite people in that space and have a sense of presence, like you can coexist with them. And you can also connect the two virtual spaces and move from one virtual space to the other virtual space in a way that you feel that you are inside it versus just looking at it.
Got it. Isn't this something though, like, VR gaming?
Yeah, I think early versions of them have been tested, right? In the sense that, yeah, I mean, you have a 3-dimensional gaming and other things. But technology has progressed so much today that the experience is much better. There are much better technologies and tools. And also, they are much more, I would say, friendlier and more convenient than they used to be. I think what you need for this to be successful is the right hardware and also network and connectivity. And both of them have progressed in leaps and bounds over the last 2-3 years. And the third important component, which people often overlook, is the mindset and attitude of the consumers or the users, right? And there, COVID has been a major accelerant, right? Because of COVID, people are much more comfortable doing things virtually than they ever have been before. And we have seen that exponential improvement or change in the way people look at technology now. This was never there before, right? So I think in my mind, I would say three things are driving this. One is, of course, COVID. Second is drop in the price of hardware, and third is improvement in connectivity and the network.
So are there special, are there special things people will have to buy, like VR sets, or
Yeah,
what does one have to
yeah,
wear to
yeah,
enter the
yeah.
metaverse?
Yeah, so I think you have to think about like a progression, right? I mean, when we all went from no connectivity to some connectivity, we all had to buy a landline phone, and that's how we connected in the early days. Then, of course, internet came in, and we had to buy modems and connectivity, and and then, of course, we had to buy a PC or a desktop. So I think that is how we progress. And I think in my mind, like the way this will happen is that the headset or VR devices will become ubiquitous and also extremely affordable in the coming few quarters. I'm not saying even years, in the coming few quarters. I think if you look at the data recently in the last quarter of 2021, more number of Oculus Quest 2 devices were sold than, of course, Microsoft Xbox. So I think you can already see that
It's amazing.
people are adopting it. In fact, a major change here would be like, what is the killer application for that, right? For example, today, these headsets are being bought, the Oculus Quest 2s are being bought as a Christmas gift, right? So that is one, that is not the killer use case, but it's more like, okay, it's a nice gift. I think the real inflection point will come when parents start realizing that this is a back to school necessity, in the sense that their kids need to have a VR headset to be able to experience classroom learning without even actually being able to physically visit the classroom. They can have the entire experience of that. And just as notebooks have become a necessity, laptops have become a necessity, I think it's only a matter of time where the headset devices will become the necessity that every parent and every student will invest in to stay ahead of the game. And I think I'm not talking about in years, I'm talking about in quarters now.
Wow, Manish, although the thought that does come to my mind immediately is that perhaps you underestimate the resistance that that's going to get from the school and education system as it exists.
No, in fact,
Because
so what
this,
we thought about this is, therefore, the area to start is higher education. I'll tell you why. Because I agree with you that parents would still want their kids to have more real experience than virtual experience at this point in time. But higher education is rife for disruption, because if you look at it, even in the work, I mean, you run the Future of Work show. Because of COVID, people have learned to work virtually and collaborate virtually, and they are far more productive now than they ever had been. And even when the offices were open between the two waves, uh, people chose not to go to office all the days. They went 1 day or 2 day a week, right? And they chose to work remotely, or they chose to collaborate differently. And even when they were at office, they're always connected. So we see the same trend coming to higher education as well. I mean, all these great universities and colleges, even if they open, we don't expect every student to go to college every day of the week. They might go 1 day a week or 2 day a week, or maybe they'll go 1 week a month, but they would still be as productive, and their learning outcomes would be far better, because they will be able to coexist and study with their classmates in virtual space, even when they are remotely located. And I think like the reality is that you cannot send the whole world to Harvards and Wharton and all the other top schools, or like IIMs in India, but you can bring these top schools to them in their bedroom through virtual reality and Metaversity, right? And that's the whole idea, that how do we deliver similar or better learning outcome, which is affordable and can be given to people at large without creating a cost that exists today. Because if you today have to go to a top college, you have to relocate yourself to a different town, you have to incur a huge expenditure in traveling, in staying in a new place, and the same learning outcome can be achieved in a very different way. And that would be a very positive use case of, I would say, a metaverse application or metaversity that we are creating.
with that, let's come to understanding what is a metaversity. One of the things I'd love for you to share is it how different is it from, say, an ed tech platform today? Is it just the three-dimensional version of it, or are there fundamental differences?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's fundamentally different because we are now thinking about, if we have the luxury of a three-dimensional space, how should the learning outcome be optimized? That's our starting question. That assuming that we have this luxury, how do we think about education and student outcomes, right? Now, what happened during COVID was that uh, everyone was forced to go online. Schools were not ready. Technology was not ready. I mean, essentially,
Yeah.
people were doing classes on Zoom and Microsoft Teams. But think about it, these tools were not made for education or for classroom. They were made for like video conferencing or office
Yeah.
activity. But then, because there was no better choice, every school across the world, including India, I mean, they moved to Microsoft Teams, and sort of whatever tool was there, they used that to the best.
Yeah.
And education was done as a by using a combination of tools. For example, classroom teaching happened on Zoom, the community building happened on Slack or Discord, and then there was a separate learning management system, and then there were quite a few other tools and technologies, right? So it was a patchwork and sort of a mix up of quite a few things. That was one form factor in which education happened during COVID. The second form factor was a recorded video, right? A teacher or a professor would record a video and they would put it behind a paywall like on Coursera's or edX. And as a student, you have to sit inside your like in a small like you have to sit in a corner in your home and watch that video without any social network, without any peer-to-peer learning, without any friends or anyone. It was almost like a punishment to watch it all alone, locked up inside your house. And no wonder the completion rate of all these MOOCs or the online learning platforms is less than 10%, right? So when we looked at that data and we looked at technology available, we said that, okay, how do we recreate or reimagine how education should be delivered in a world where everyone would not be physically co-located, right? And how do we optimize learning outcome? And a couple of insights that we got was a lot of learning, or in fact majority of learning, doesn't happen in a classroom. It actually happens outside the classroom when you hang out with your friends in library, in auditorium, in the hallway. There is huge amount of serendipity, right? And that is how education happens. And even if I go back to my college days, I used to go to college and hang out there even if there was no class, because I wanted to know what my friends were up to, what project work they were doing, what internship they were applying for. Now, so all that serendipity and the social element is missing today in online learning, right? I mean, if you go take a
Yeah.
Zoom class, it's very scripted, it's very transactional. You go take a class, you log out, and then of course there is no network, there is no social layer. And given that I ran Twitter, I know how important it is to have that social layer. And I also know how important community plays. Like, I mean, how it leads to a positive behavior when you're part of community, how this network really help you um, you know, uh, you know, achieve things that you want to achieve. So we are bringing that in. So we are saying, okay, first we need to think about a virtual space, which feels like you coexist with your classmates. It should not feel like you are looking at it, but it should feel like you are inside it. That's one. The second is there has to be a social layer. So peer-to-peer learning is important, network is important. So there has to be a social layer. And third, there has to be serendipity. A lot of learning happen when you don't go with an agenda. Like you make real friends when you meet someone without an agenda. When you
Yeah.
meet someone with an agenda, you're doing a business transaction, right? So friendship is all about serendipity. It's all about meeting people. I mean, people say you waste a lot of time, but I think that's the time worth wasting to build your real friends and people who really are there for you, and for you also to learn things that you didn't know even that you need to learn, right? So I think we are incorporating these three elements, right? A virtual three-dimensional space, a social layer, and third is serendipity, and that's what we are calling it Metaversity. So it's a play on two words. Metaverse plus university is Metaversity. So that's the way this name was coined. And when we say Metaversity, we mean the platform that enables these kind of education. So it's not to say that we will do every kind of education, but we will build the platform on which third-party creators can come and teach. Colleges and universities can also come and teach. It's almost like we are creating this entire education mall on which different education institutions can set up their shop, and also individual course creators can also come and teach. And as a platform, we will take care of three things. One is virtual identity. So the identity of a student, and that will be managed by us and managing their profile. Because today, identity, face it, it's all
Yes.
fragmented and broken, right? I mean, And because you are spending a lot of time online, your virtual identity now is more important than your real identity. So the first part would be managing the identity. Second is managing the experience, which is what I talked about, that how do you ensure that they have a great experience when they are in the Metaversity classroom, right? What does that experience look like? And a lot of fundamental innovation is happening there, because what has happened so far is that whatever course was being taught in a physical setup, people simply put that online and assume that that is the right way. But if you think from other industries, like for example, when e-commerce came, you didn't simply put a picture of what was being sold in a physical shop online on Amazon or Flipkart. You actually rethought about the whole ordering process. You rethought about the logistics, the payment. You have to think about every aspect without having a legacy baggage, right? So existing universities and existing setup will have a lot of legacy baggage because they are already tied up with the existing way of doing things. So we are now fundamentally innovating, saying, okay, in a virtual, what would the virtual experience would look like? And third is virtual assets, because you are spending more time online. The kind of assets you are creating online now is going to be very important. So you, as a student, you need to think about how do you own that, right? And when I'm saying about virtual assets ownership, in the student's life, that would be about their project work, their credentials, their certificates, their kudos, their social credits. Everything has to be owned by them. And I think today there is no single platform, or there is no easy way of doing it. I mean, it's all a mix up. So as a platform, we'll provide three services. One is identity, second is experience, and third is ownership. And of course, on this platform, we will invite, first of all, we are building a few courses ourselves. Like, for example, the first course is the Meta MBA program, which is a business foundation program, for which we are already admitting students. And there's a huge waiting list for that. And then once we run that, it will give us insights about what is working, so that we can double down on that, and what is not working, so that we can then sort of pivot on that. And once we perfect that, we will then invite colleges to then recreate their campus and conduct their classes on this and get that feedback. And then also, of course, we'll invite independent course creators who are currently on YouTube, etc. We will offer them, saying, hey, you're anyway doing this on a two-dimensional platforms. Why don't you want to come and do it on a three-dimensional platform and see whether it leads to a better outcome? A lot of questions, a lot of unknowns, but we are excited that it's a completely new area, and there is so much fun in sort of being in that discovery mode.
No, it sounds amazing. And just help me understand and visualize this, Manish. So does this mean that if I wear a VR set and enter your Impact Metaversity and the MBA program, there'll be different classrooms, and I can, sit in one classroom, and after the class is over, maybe we just walk down a hallway, interact with people, go to the cafeteria, have virtual chai.
Yes.
Is that the kind of experience?
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way. In fact, those of who want to get a real feel of it, we have a video out. They can type URL invact.vision. So invact.vision. And if they go to the site, they can see video of how that would look like. Others who want to actually experience it, they can also go to a site called invact.live and sign up as a guest, and they can actually walk around. And if they have a VR device like Oculus Quest, they can go to the browser on the device, and they can type this URL invact.live, and they can actually walk on the campus as well. So all that is live right now. Now, to your question, if you have to imagine how this would be, like, for example, think about a 3D game, like when you're playing PUBG or even when kids hang out on Roblox. So when you are playing these games or hanging out there, what you see is a 3D space, right? It is on a 2D device because you are not wearing a headset. So you see that in a 2D device, but what you see is a 3D rendering. And when you say 3D, there is a line of sight vision. That's one. The second thing is spatial audio, in the sense that if you say something, only people next to you can hear it, not people and that's very important in a classroom, because when you are joking or making fun of the teacher, you only want people on next to you to hear the joke and not the teacher, right?
New technologies for gossiping in class will emerge.
Think about it this way, right?
No, it's important, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm all for it.
Otherwise, there's a fun element today in a Zoom class, right? Because I remember, right, when we were going to a physical class, the incentive of a backbencher to go to a class versus the incentive of a front bencher was very different. The front benchers were there to get grades. The backbenchers were there to have fun, right?
Yes.
Now, today in Zoom or any of these classes, you can't do that, because when you say something, everyone hears it. And when you
Yeah.
mute yourself, no one hears you, right? So there
Yeah.
is, so the other thing is the power equation is very different, right? I mean, in a classroom, the setup is different. Uh, Different people have different power dynamics there. The other thing is the collaboration happens differently in a classroom. So we have to think fundamentally that what the experience would be like. So yes, there would be some kind of a setup. It need not be exactly like a physical classroom, but it would be a shared space which takes into account what is the educational outcome or the learning outcome we are solving, and how we can deliver that experience in a virtual world. And as you think about it, right? I mean, among the next generation or the younger people, they are already spending more time on Roblox and Fortnite, etc. So it's like the early signs are already there that
Yeah.
for the coming generation, being present virtually is the first or the default behavior.
Yeah.
And meeting someone in person is actually an extra effort. It's almost like today that the people's default behavior is to shop online,
Yeah.
and that is where most of the shopping happens. And going to a shopping mall is like, yeah, we'll do it once in a month or once in a while
Yeah.
when something really interesting happens there. And the same with happening with entertainment, right? I mean, watching a movie on your Netflix or Amazon Prime is the default behavior now.
Yeah.
And going to a movie hall is a once in a month activity, right? The
Mhm.
same is going to happen with education. Getting learning virtually will be the default way of learning. And going to a college or campus would be a nice to have, and you will do that once in a while to to just add another flavor. But then, of course, there could be much better way of learning, which are far more efficient and much far more effective as well.
I have so many questions, but then there are so many questions on the chat, so I'm going to just take a few of them. Uh, Hi, Harish. Hi, Yashwant. Nice to have you here. Anshuman, hi, lovely. Thank you for joining in. Vijay says, interesting topic. Metaverse is the key to the future of technology. Absolutely. Ali says, multiverse is a world where all your dreams exist. Multiverse is the division between real world and virtual world. Hi, Anuradha. Insightful topic on such an insightful conversation, such an interesting topic. Fizian says, good morning. Hi, Fizian. Sweetgrit says, we are Oculus sold more than Xbox. That's something interesting, which it absolutely is. I wasn't aware. Hi, Papia. Good to see you there. She's my co-founder at Uncube. Srivatsan says, Metaverse might be good for additional education, but hands-on learning like in design, engineering, and even science doesn't seem to be realistic. Let me just ask you what your thoughts are on this.
No, in fact, it's a very good question. I'll tell you why. We thought about it, right? For example, we are talking to IIT Madras on creating a virtual lab, and the reason why we that discussion happened was that you can have this amazing lab in the physical world, but no one is visiting them for the last 2 years. They're all lying
Yes.
there, right? I mean, these amazing campuses. Like I went to
Yeah.
work in, it has an amazing campus on the Schuylkill River, but for 2 years, no one visited it, right? So the question is, you can have the same campus or even better campus and better facility in a virtual space. And think about it, like if you are a medical student, you can practice things with the virtual models. If you are a physics student, if you're doing something on the shop floor, you are not compelled to go to a shop floor and see it. You can create a model of that and then try it, and you can have all the real kind of sensation of what it would be like to do that. For example, if you're learning about ancient Rome, you can actually be walking in ancient Rome and actually seeing the Colosseums and other things, rather than just reading a book about it. So all that virtual models can be created, and the idea would be that you know how do you deliver amazing learning outcome and make it accessible and available to everyone? Because today, all said and done, a very small portion of the world population, maybe 1% of the people, have access to the kind of funds needed and the kind of I would say support needed to make it to these top colleges and get the best education, right? And I think if
Yes.
we can leverage technology to bring the best education to them in their bedroom and make it possible at a fraction of a cost. And because of technology, the cost can be a fraction because you don't have to build all this in physical world. You have to build it virtually once, and it can be repurposed and recreated, and it can be redeployed as many times as you want with a flip of a switch. It's as simple as that, right? The other day, someone was saying we need to create more IITs. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can create as many IITs as you want virtually. I mean, it will take us just a minute. And we can have the same facilities, and we can have even better learning outcomes because you can measure and you can see which student is progressing well, which student is lagging, where the nudge is needed. All the information can be captured, and sort of we can optimize the whole learning program, and we can customize it to the every student. Today, I mean, as a student, you get treated the same, right, in a physical classroom.
Yeah.
But in the virtual classroom, you can have a very customized program as well. And I think we can do many interesting stuff once this takes off.
I think Srivatsan's question might be to do with the fact that you probably need something more than, a Oculus set, right? Maybe a haptic suit or something that enables you to actually do something with your hands, right? To
No,
be
so I
able
think
to
the technology is getting so
physically.
advanced that this camera itself can capture your body movement. You can program it. It can know where is the hand. It can capture your facial expressions. So you can do many things. I mean, technology is progressing at an amazingly fast pace, right? So of course, if you have haptic suit and all that, you can also get the feeling of warmth and sort of other things as well. But simply by waving your hand, you can do many things. You can capture your eye movement, capture your lip movement. You can capture your facial expressions. So all that stuff is already possible with the kind of camera you have already on the current
Really?
laptop. Yeah. So those things have become
That's
quite.
interesting.
Yeah, because think about it, right? When you open an iPhone or any of the phone, it captures your face and it's able to recognize you. So the technology is there. The question is, how do you use technology for education? Is the question. I mean, technology is not a problem right now. The problem is, okay, what is the right use case, and how do you bring different pieces together to solve for learning outcome is where I think original insight is needed and an initiative is needed.
So just help me understand, Manisha, does that mean that things like, in a lab, for instance, like if it's a biology lab, you would be doing, dissection of a cockroach or some
You can do
equally
that.
fun
Yeah, you can do that
activity. So
virtually as well.
you can do
Yeah.
that virtually with the
And this would
existing
it would feel
technology.
like exactly like it would be in the real world, right? So it would get to a point where, see, the simulations have been done, right? It's not like a new problem. Simulation, like
Yeah.
even for flight simulations, pilots have been training on simulated devices, right? The thing now is that because the virtual reality technology has become so much more advanced that you feel as if it's in the real world, right? Of course, when you remove the device, you feel like, yeah, I mean, this is not real. But then as long as
Right.
you're wearing it, you feel like
It's
you're
that
actually.
immersive.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
very immersive.
correct.
I mean, you will feel like you're sitting next to a classmate, and two people can sit next to each other, and they would feel like actually you are sitting next to it. Like you, that's almost as good as that, right? And today it is
I
something in two-dimensional space, right? For example, two of us are
Yeah.
talking, but this is a two-dimensional space. Imagine if this program was happening in a three-dimensional space. How would it feel?
Yeah. It's amazing. And,
Yeah.
just as you speak, I was thinking of, so Uncube does a lot of work on, what will the future organization look like? And, but this opens out the whole opportunity for the digital part of your workday to happen in a three-dimensional, immersive space, almost like visiting your office, but, you know, through the metaverse. So you're there,
Yeah.
even though you're actually at home. It's
Think
pretty
about it like
interesting.
embodiment. Like you feel like embodied. Today you look at something and say, oh, it is there and I can see it, but you
Yeah.
don't feel I am inside it, right? And imagine the feeling that um, you feel like you are inside it and you are embodying it, right? And that's a very different feeling. And that feeling is what you get when you think about metaversity.
Really interesting. Srivatsan, I hope that answered your question. Samir says, Dr. Shalini Lal, Manishan, VR is a powerful new tool in soft skill development. A use case being explored for reading, he's given an example. Manu says, may we say it like extracurricular activities type of skill? But I think you're talking about not just extracurriculars, but the actual education happening in the classroom, but also having the opportunity to then step out of the classroom and do stuff which you don't have in the two-dimensional Zoom or Teams kind of interface. I think that's
I
what
was
you're
just
referring to.
thinking, I don't know if I can project it live on this. Maybe I can show something to you, but I don't
I'll
know.
add the link. I'll add the link after this.
Yeah, is that
I'll add
like, I mean, there is a button for sharing. In fact, I just feel so tempted that I want to share
Oh, go
something.
ahead. Let's
Let's
try
see
it
if it
out.
works or not.
Let's try it out.
So
Yeah.
um, let me see if the sharing screen work. Um, yeah, see, almost like this, right? I mean, so today I am showing it to you on a 2D device, so it seems like we are watching a three-dimensional space, and it says VR not supported because I'm not into VR device. But if you had the VR device, you would be this person and things would be all around you, and you would feel like it's all immersive, right? And then when you talk about classroom, let me show it to you. Like, for example, imagine that you are hanging out with people here and you run into interesting people like your batchmates, your classmates, you run into like great speakers here, things like that, right? So those kind of stuff. And then you go into a classroom like this, you will sit here, your batchmates would be there. All those things are possible, right? And this is like a prototype, but I think the real thing is even more advanced, and I think it has many other concepts. Uh, so let me stop this. Um,
No, thank you. That really
that give
helped.
you a bit of a visualization of like how it will come across. Like this was a
Yeah.
very rudimentary one because I was showing to you on a 2D device, so you were seeing the whole setup. But imagine uh, you don't see that person walking, but you are that person, and you are
Yeah.
actually inside that classroom, and all your batchmates are also there, sitting there. Either they can have their own face if they want to, and they can also put on any other avatar. Like, and imagine like how emancipating that would be, like when you can be whosoever you want to be. That optimizes your learning outcome, and people don't judge you based on your color of your skin, your gender, your height, I mean your hair, like whatever, right? So people, you can be whatever you want, right? And also your age, right? I mean, so you can be whatever you want, so as it optimizes your learning outcome, and you can separate your physical being from actually who you are, right?
You
And
know,
you can
Manish, now,
put it in any shape and format. And I think how powerful that would
yeah.
be. And think about it, like for a country like India, right? When a lot of people face this problem where they are judged based on how they look, who they are, the color of the skin, many other things, right? We can get rid of all that problem, and we can simply optimize for learning outcome.
No, I think on the one hand, that's hugely, hugely liberating. But I just want to ask you, in the gaming world, for instance, which is perhaps where, what seems to be closest in my mind to, what this experience will be like, where it is, people join in from anywhere in the world. They take on avatars the way they would like that avatar to be. That avatar may or may not have anything to do with, who they are or how they actually look. There's also a lot of, in fact, there was a New York Times article recently. There's a lot of scope for uh, unwanted behavior, like
Mm.
bullying, like harassment. And, in fact, the New York Times article spoke about how one woman who was in the woman's avatar got harassed and actually groped by
Yeah.
somebody. And because it was a VR experience, it felt very intrusive and very real. And one of the things the assaulter said was that this is the metaverse. There are no rules here, which
Yeah.
is true. So, like, what is the law of the land in the metaverse? Like, what
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah.
And that seemed pretty horrifying. If some of the, on the one hand, absolutely, I agree with you that, you can be whoever you want, and that's such a wonderful thing. I think all of us would be 20 forever, maybe. But on the other hand, what about the fact that people can now bring their worst side, and some will, right? And feel completely free to get away with anything because,
Yeah. You ask a very profound question, and I'll tell you my view on that, right? Um, Technology is evolving much faster than regulation. And I think, in my mind, rules, regulations, governance standards will also have to catch up, right? So that's the bottom line of that. In fact, um, I have dealt with this real time, like in the in on a first hand basis, because I used to run Twitter for India, right? So clearly, you could have the same argument that people bring their worst side when they are online, and
and
when you
on
have
Twitter particularly, I would
and on
say.
and anonymity, and you can have pseudonymity, you can be whatever you want to be. And I think uh, I have dealt with that, and I have seen what works and what doesn't work. So clearly those learnings will bring to metaverse as well. And I think there are two ways to solve this. One would be, as the platform provider, which in this case would be us for Metaversity, we will have to devise our own governance standards and ways for enforcing that. If people do not behave in a certain way, which is in line with the committee guidelines, they can be suspended or they could be removed from the platform. That is at the platform level. Secondly, we also have to engage in some kind of a peer-based monitoring system where people can report bad behavior, and as a community things improve, right? I mean, ideally you want community to sort of come in. It's like even in the physical world, right? What happens, right? I mean, we behave nicely because we have friends and family and a community pressure to be nice people, right?
Yes.
There's one. And of course, if you still behave badly, there is of course the police there, and I think there's of course the law enforcement and other things. So you deal with that at two levels in any physical world as well. And I think even physical world evolved over time, right? It's not like these norms came into being overnight. That as a society and as a community, we learned what behaviors are right, what behavior should be encouraged, what behavior should be penalized. The same happened with the internet. When internet came in the early days, there were no rules, there were no community guidelines. People were all lost. Over the years, we have certain standards and practices, right? I mean, and I think we all learn. I mean, we don't know everything, but when we see a problem, we all are smart people, so we all figure out a way to solve it, and the best one continues, and what cannot be solved, sort of, then we sort of eliminate it, right? I mean, that's how we do it. So the same will happen in the case of Metaversity in this case, which is we in fact we are already drafting community guidelines in terms of how people should behave in this, what are acceptable behaviors, what are not acceptable behaviors. If people engage in unacceptable behavior, what are the guidelines in terms of how to deal with that. And secondly, even at regulatory level, I'm sure, I mean, if this thing starts becoming big, I think regulations would get formed, just as internet regulation came. Metaverse regulation could also come at some point, but we will not wait for that. I mean, as a
Yeah.
platform, we want good behavior because we want this to become successful and popular. So it's in our own interest to devise governance standards and build community practices in a way that is conducive for everyone, encourages everyone to become better version of themselves, and also improve the learning outcome for everyone, because that's the only way to be successful. So that's a very
So,
important thing.
yeah.
And we have a vested interest in making sure that it does happen the right way. And early days, so clearly some people are very fearful, but my view would be that there is more goodness than there is badness in this world. So I think trust the fact that there'll be good people as well. There would be a few bad apples, and we will have to get better in removing them.
No, I completely with you that there are far more good people than bad, but yet it's also the reality that bad things happen, and bad things happen in the real world. They can happen in the virtual world, perhaps even more easily, because there's no one's as yet clear what law applies. But I'm sure you'll have some kind of induction, to sort of help people make this transition from the physical. Now, I don't even want to say in the real world, because it's all getting all confusing. What's the
I know,
real
because
world and what's the unreal world?
I struggle the same way, Shalini, that sometimes they're like, what is real? Like when you're spending more time online and virtually, is virtual the real, and then the
Yeah,
real are a secondary? I mean, like, what do you call real? Because, and
yeah,
that is also a very important point, that when you're hanging a lot more online, uh, the way you carry yourself virtually is far more important now. Your identity,
yeah.
the kind of trail you leave there, the kind of brand that you form, that's actually more important than your real self now, right?
100%. I mean, for most of us, if you do a Google search, there'll be like,
Yeah,
pages and pages, right?
yeah,
And people can form their own understanding, good or bad, about who we are through this sort of digital trail we are leaving, which we can never erase. Compared to, in real life, I may meet maybe like two people or three people a day,
yes,
whereas in the
yeah,
virtual world I may be meeting hundreds. So
yeah.
it's a very different level of impact. So let me ask you then, Manish, how do you see, there's the work Impact, of course, is doing, and you're really at the cutting edge of this, but how do you see education itself getting transformed over the next let's say 10 years?
Yeah. So I have very strong opinion on this, because I'll tell you why. Because I have seen education at different levels, and I have seen in different countries, and I have been a teacher as well. I mean, if you think about it, like from my high school days, I have been teaching. Even at Wharton, I was a teaching assistant, and that's how I paid for my entire tuition, because I could not afford that fees coming from India at a very with a very little amount of savings. So my view is the following, that education has to be much more outcome oriented, uh, in the sense that there is the basic research kind of education where you have to think about, like, okay, how are we delivering cutting edge research, and that would be the centers of excellence, which will do all like the innovation side. But the far majority of the people and the educational institutions have to be focused on employability and employable skills. Like, how do you build the connect with the industry and the societal needs? And how do you train people in a way that they have the right skill set to be productive members of the society and industry, and are able to get decent jobs and earn a livelihood, right? The problem in India, and I'm talking about India specifically, of course, there
Yeah.
are problems in many countries just because the audience is primarily from India here, is India has a very large population of educated but unemployable people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the other data the other way I was looking was that the employability is less than 20-30%, like of every
Yeah.
100 people
Correct.
graduate.
Yeah.
Uh, and
20 to 30% is the
Yeah.
usual
So most,
stats.
yeah. So as a result, what happens is most corporates have to incur huge amount of cost just on the onboarding. Like the first 3 to 6 months, they hire a fresher and they have to onboard them and they have to train them. And there's also huge frustration on the student side because they have this degree, but it's good
Yeah.
for nothing because no one gets them a job. And I think, and what we are doing with Invact is we are trying to deliver effective education, and the way we call effective education is that it should be uh, practitioner led, it should be based on industry need, and the whole education should lead to some proof of work through which the student get the confidence that they can do the work required, and more importantly the hiring manager gets the confidence that here is a student who has done this work, so it is more I can then decide I can hire them or not. Because all said and done in India, most of the hiring happens on signal, and the only signal most hiring manager use is your academic education.
Yeah.
From IIT or IIM, the assumption is that you are a good person and you get hired. So the problem is only 1% people go to IIT and IIM. So what happens to the remaining 90% people, 95% people, because they don't have college as a signal, even if they are talented, it's very tough for them to even get shortlisted for interview, and no one sort of really has faith in them, right? I mean, so our view is that can we in the Metaversity create a curriculum which is based on proof of work, which is basically getting them to do project work which they can publicly share, put it on the chain, can get peer reviewed, can be shared by people on the social media, which gives them that confidence that they can do the job, and also gives the confidence to the hiring manager to hire them. It's almost like saying that when you're it's almost like helping them prepare a portfolio of their work, which is the signal to be used versus what college you went to or what city you came from or who was your father, who was your uncle, right? I mean, like, why are those relevant? What is relevant is what can you do, and what's your track record, and what's the work that you have done, and that should be the only criteria for hiring someone, right? It's like when you book something on Airbnb, you don't interview the owner of the house. You look at the house and the pictures and the garden and all that stuff, and then you book it online. I think in my mind, we need to fundamentally rethink education and also the hiring process.
Where this is leading me to think within the conversation around future organizations, one big idea is that tomorrow's organizations will be far more skill oriented than competencies or education, etc. Simply because you want people who can actually do something, not necessarily people who've studied something, but who can actually do something. And I can see how a metaversity like yours, and probably with time there'll be many metaversities, could play this very interesting role of not just, this is the project, which of course you're thinking of, but at the end, this is the sort of skills which this person like me, I stand out and say ABC, and I might suck at whatever XYZ, and which doesn't have to be on my report card, but at least the things which you shine in, your primary skills are these five. You've done a lot of work on these five. Your project work has, sort of translated into these 5 or 6 key skills, which then, and I'm sure you can map them for different career paths. So, say a marketing skill set, a general management, or whatever. So, anyway, there seems to be
I
a
want to, I
lot
want to
that
put
can
on your
happen.
point, in fact, Shalini, what we are thinking in Metaversity is because we would be able to see people's progression, and this
Yes.
would happen in the virtual space, so everything can be documented. Uh, we can then grade and rate them, and almost like build their online portfolio based on the course
Yes.
that they have done, which can then become the standard for a hiring manager to decide who to shortlist and who to hire based on the skills that they need for
Yeah.
their role. And I think today it's all fragmented and broken because it's
Yes.
all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But it need not be like that. It can be done in a much better way, and I think those would be some of the downstream ideas that we will start working once we get the experience side fixed. We also need to think about the life cycle of a student. So
Yeah.
ultimate life cycle would be, how do we give them the right kind of launch pad when they graduate, and then how do we also ensure that they have a way of lifelong learning and building on skill set that the future industries would require, or future work would demand, right? So all
Yeah.
that can be done as a life cycle management of a student on the Metaversity.
Do you think eventually what will happen is, just the way, say, IIMs they have their in-person programs, they have their whatever, virtual programs on ABC platform, who are their platform edtech partners, right? Do you imagine that eventually every physical campus will also have its own place in the metaverse,
Yeah,
hosted somewhere where their
yeah.
physical structures replicated, their curriculum is sort of reformatted, I guess, for or
You hit on a very
redesigned.
good point. Like, what has happened is that every physical brand has an online website, every physical
Yeah,
brand has an online presence. Because no one can say today that, hey, I'm a physical brand, I don't need to be present online. The world is online, right? So everyone, some accepted this fact and came in early. So they were the early adopters, and there were some who were laggards.
Nike, yeah, Nike and all were
Exactly,
some of
right?
the earliest
Yes.
ones
I
to.
used to run Flipkart marketplace, so I know this more than anyone else. That there was a range of brands. Like the big brands said, I have my own shop and I am a well-known brand. Why should I sell online? People will come to my store. After 1 year, they realized that no one is going to their store.
Nobody's coming.
People are buying,
Yeah.
and then they kept calling. Like initially, when I reached out to them, they were like, "We don't want to talk to you." And then they were the one calling me saying, "Hey, when can I get onboarded on Flipkart?" Right. The
Yeah.
same would happen with education as well, right? I mean, uh, every physical education space has to have an online presence, and they have to offer their courses online. And online doesn't mean just putting the course on a YouTube video, right? That's like, it's like saying, "Hey, I have a marketing brochure on a piece of page, and here's a picture of that, and I put it online." It's not like that's not going to work, right? Because
Yeah.
the way people behave online is not like just looking at a picture or a video. You have to fundamentally rethink what is the journey of a learner in the metaverse or in the virtual space, and then you have to rethink saying, okay, what should my educational program look like for a set of people, where one person will log in from a town, one will from a village, one from the campus, and if they have to have a shared experience, what would that look like, and what kind of courses would be right for them, and how do we think about their learning journey, right? So in the other industry, we talk about our customer journey. We have to think about student journey here, right?
Yeah.
End-to-end student journey, and managing the life cycle of a student and the whole experience of learning as well. So my view would be, there will be some early adopters, and there will be the majority will come in after that, and then of course there'll be some laggards. And I think we'll see, I mean, how things evolve from there.
One final question from me, Manish. Do you think there's given that the metaverse is such an immersive experience, and as you said, it's like an embodied experience of
Yes.
learning. Uh, is there a age when this is appropriate? Like is it that if you're 4 years old, for instance, would you
Yeah.
get completely confused about what is the physical world, what is the virtual world, who am I this, my avatar, am I this, like when is it safe without kids getting completely disoriented?
No, I think you ask a philosophical question. Like sometimes I also think, like, who am I? Am I the person who is virtually existing, or am I existing in the physical form? Or is my soul me? Like, I mean, for example, as a soul, I have taken this body of this person. Like, like I can give up this body and move into a different body as well. Like I'm being a slightly even more philosophical. So the question is, it's a very philosophical question, that who are you? Is the physical you, is the virtual you, or the consciousness that you embody, like that you have here, is that you, right? So let's not get into that right now, but on a more practical question about, okay, who is this appropriate for? So I think we are only targeting people who are higher education right now, right? Because clearly a lot of things have to be figured out, so we don't want to get into other tricky areas right now when things are evolving so fast. We'll only focus on higher education right now. And I think the cutoff for us is 18 plus, where like has to be the minimum, right?
Right.
And of course, as things become clearer, we can then define what's the right guardrails and how do you sort of manage all
Yeah.
this. But you hit on a very good point, and I also wonder, like, who am I? Like, is the physical body this is me,
But
or
wondering at
like,
our age and
the
wondering
one I
at
am
four,
on social media is me?
you know, at four, if I remember myself, whatever fragmented
Yeah,
memories I have, I think I was still not sure whether the imaginary me was me, whether my imaginary friends were real,
yeah,
So I'm just wondering. So I'm going to
yeah.
take the last few questions. Sneha says, will companies hire with resumes and interviews in the future?
Sorry, I didn't get the
Sneha,
question. What's the
now, will
question?
companies hire with resume and interviews in the future? I think Manish seems to have indicated that the way he is conceptualizing, it will be much more than the resumes and interviews. It will be
Yeah,
almost
my
the
view would be like, see, resumes worked when there were limited signals, and resume was the signal, right? What college you went to, what course you did, right? And that was in the early days, right? Today, you can get much richer signal, and you have much better prediction on who would be right for the job, because there is so much more information available, and you can draw insights and you can aggregate that data and sort of bring that to the front. That's one insight. Second is, our philosophy is that we will focus on proof of work, in the sense that when people come and learn with us, we will get them do real project, and that will form a portfolio which can then be organized, and hiring manager can look at that. They can double down and say, oh, what project you did. For example, let me give a practical example. If you're hiring for an entry level marketing person, like a marketing associate or a marketing coordinator, as a hiring manager, you would be able to see, okay, what kind of marketing plan they have written, what kind of marketing campaigns they have run, and how successful they have been. And that would be the basis for deciding that, oh, can I hire you? Versus like what course you have done and from what college, right? So
yeah,
not just degree, in my mind, uh, is a weak indicator for success, right? What is a much better indicator is your actual track record and what you have done, and what you can demonstrate that you are able to do. That's a much better
yeah,
way of predicting success, and also
yeah,
fitment for the role. Like if you look at in India, most people blindly take their first job, and after 1 year they realize that they're in the long job, and there is huge career switching, right? And there's huge frustration both on the side of
yeah,
a hiring manager, because they hire in bulk because they know that 30% will stick and 70% will leave. So there's a huge wastage on the hiring side, and student also end up like questioning their own identity and credibility, saying, am I the right person? Am I not smart enough, or
yeah,
am I not right? Like it's just that everyone is right for the right role, right? I mean, if you end up in a wrong role, I mean, then you are wrong. Then the role is wrong and you are wrong, right? So the question is, we need to find what is the right role for every student, and that can be done in a much better way now than it was ever possible before.
yeah, absolutely makes sense. So I'm going to take one question by Anil Santapuri. Hi, Anil. Good to see you here. Anil says, can you comment on pedagogical shifts needed to be made?
Yeah. So I think I talked about a couple of them, right? One would be it. At least our philosophy, I'll tell you. Like now, everyone can have their own philosophy. Our philosophy is it has to be industry linked or societal need linked, right? Education should lead to a definite outcome in terms of improvement uh, in the person's fitment for the societal need. So it has to be industry need or industry need linked. It should be practitioner led to a great extent, because
Mhm.
our philosophy is employability. Like how do we help more people become employable? So it has to be practitioner led to a great extent. And third is it should be based on demonstrable skills, which we are calling proof of work, right? So it should be based on what you have done, not just what you have studied, right? What you can really do. So those are the things I'm thinking about. The other thing also is that technology allows you to do things much faster. It allows you to cull out things which are not relevant, so you can make things very efficient. You can improve learning outcomes by really measuring the input items. For example, technology has led to efficiency everywhere. Why should we not let technology make education efficient?
Yeah.
Why do you have to spend 2 years of your life to do an MBA when you can pick the right things for the role that you aspire to be and deliver that in 4 months? And that's why our Meta MBA program is only 4 months. And our view is that it would be as good as anyone doing a 2 year MBA.
No, I am associated with many business schools, and I can tell you, you know, education is ripe for disruption. It's really there. So I can see how this is going to shift everything. Uh, so Rajesh says project work has been part of the learning curriculum and marketing courses for a very long time. Absolutely true, Rajesh. I think what Manish is saying is that usually as interviewers, we ask people about their projects. Here, now
Which
you
really
have a
show,
chance.
right? Yeah.
Correct.
So I'll tell you two differences here, right? The interviewer need not ask. They can actually see it because it would be available in public on the chain, in peer reviewed and commented by industry leaders. Like, for example, a marketing plan, right? Like, imagine a student preparing a marketing
Yeah.
campaign and posting it out there for everyone to see and make it available to people to review it and comment it. And based on the comment and the review, it ranks up or down, right?
Yeah.
Would that not be a better signal than asking someone, hey, what course you did and
Yeah.
what is the definition of this and how would you hypothetically run this campaign? Like, why do
Correct.
you have to ask a hypothetical question when you can actually see them actually doing it? And technology lowers the cost of doing it. Like, in the earlier world, to run a marketing campaign, you actually had to spend a lot of money and do many things.
Yeah.
Like, today, I don't think you need to do that. The same with, like, for example, let's say another course like strategy work, right? For example, uh, the project work or the coursework could be, okay, build a strategy for, say, how Razorpay should enter Indonesia, right? Now, a student of strategy could build that whole thinking process and the framework and how we should think about it, and that can then be published. So then if you're hiring for a strategy role or a founder's office role, you can say, okay, this person has done this work. Here is how they build the framework. This is how they analyze. This is how they have done the research. That's a far better predictor than saying, okay, which college you went to and what course you did in strategy, right? It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if your work is so amazing, and I look at it and I realize that, what, even people who are in my company do exactly the same work or even probably worse than what you are doing, then I would rather have you, right? And I think as long as that is credible, it is peer reviewed, it is publicly available, publicly verified, then I can also build trust and credibility. Because the problem is today, in the physical world or in the non blockchain based world, you don't know who owns what. But all
Yes.
your assets are virtual. Every project work is now done digitally. But if you put it on the chain and you sort of own it as well, and that's why we talked about virtual ownership of assets. So when I
Yeah.
say virtual ownership, in students' case, that would be their project work, their coursework, everything. So if it is
Yeah.
publicly verified and on the chain, then you know that this person is the one who actually did
Yes.
it, not like he copied it from somewhere or someone else did it and they're just
Yeah.
plagiarizing it, right? So that ownership becomes actually important in the virtual world now, and that leads me to, like, okay, we are not only thinking about experience or the identity, but also the ownership part also becomes very important. And now technology allows you to do that
Yes.
with NFTs and everything else.
Yes. So I'm going to take one last comment by Sneha Prajapati. So she says, and this links to the point you were making, like games can, how can games be useful for hiring? Because VR games course can be a proof of work for a job. And she's given examples like a pilot, community manager, so on. Sneha, absolutely. And I think that's true for many kinds of roles. And I think that's the imagination behind Metaversity, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Sneha's point is very good. In fact, that's how we are thinking.
Right. So we are at the end of our time together, Manish. Such an interesting conversation. Before we end, are there one or two things you want to leave our viewers with that they should understand about the metaversity in general?
Yeah, so I think one thing I want to tell people is, you know, many times we think about, like, okay, we couldn't become someone or we couldn't get to somewhere because there was something in us lacking.
Yeah.
What I want to change the shift to is that, see, to a great extent, it's about fitment and getting the right platform and the right technology to you, right? I mean, everyone is capable of doing something great. The question is about finding the right fit. And I think, in my view, uh, technology and the way we are imagining education now, it will be possible for anyone to get the relevant education in an immersive fashion anywhere you are and at a price you can afford. Because with technology, we can make that possible. And that was never possible before. Either you had to give up on the experience, you had to give up on the social side of it or the network. But now we can bring everything together and pick the best of everything and sew it together in a way that it makes uh, sense to the student. And therefore, in my view, this is gonna be game changing for education. And therefore, we will see new kind of takeoff happening. We have seen that happen in shopping. We have seen that happen in entertainment. We have seen that happen in fintech and health. But I think education probably is one of the areas where I'm personally passionate about making disruption and changing everything for the betterment of all the students globally.
On those last words, let's come to an end of our conversation today. Thank you all for joining us. Do be sure to join us next Saturday. My guest next Saturday is Amit Ranjan. He's the co-founder of SlideShare and the chief architect of DigiLocker. So that's going to be another really interesting conversation. Do also check out Uncube's newsletter called Eyeing the Future. It's available on my LinkedIn profile, where we give our own informal commentary through the research that we do on how India is changing, how employee expectations are changing, and the new ideas that are changing the way organizations are coming together. So, with that, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you. Bye for now.